The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand. We gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want. We got to organize.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those of you who never heard of us, you're not familiar with the A-APRP, we were actually founded in 1968 by the late, great Kwame Ture. Our objective here at the A-APRP is Pan-Africanism, which we define as a totally liberated and unified Africa under scientific socialism. This definition was actually formed during the Fifth Pan-African Congress that took place in 1945. So as you guys can see here today, I have my two comrades with me. I have Jamilah and I also have my comrade Evan. So I'll go ahead and let my comrade Evan go ahead and honor our ancestors too as well before we start the episode.
Before you go, Evan, with the cat hat, apparently people were commenting on the cat hat.
Yeah, so as we do for every episode, we always honor our ancestors because we recognize that we want to be doing what we're doing. We want to understand what we understand without the work of our ancestors. And for this episode, we're going to honor Steve Biko and Anna Julia Cooper. So Steve Biko, he was founder of the Black Consciousness Movement in Azania, which is known as Occupy Azania, which is known as South Africa. And as you know, like he was Pan-Africanist and also worked against the apartheid movement. And even though he did work as he worked militantly, but not with firearms or anything like that. But he did organize Africans as well as others who weren't European. But he's also recognized that in order to liberate Africans in Azania and the rest of the continent, that understand ourselves and understand that we have a history. And the other ancestors we're honoring is Anna Julia Cooper. She's regarded as one of, if not the early founders of what was now known as Black feminism. And she was also part of the first Pan-African Congress and was a very vital person of the eras of studying. If you important book, A Voice from the South, it is talk about, and which gives a light on the conditions of African women in the United States were facing. Those both their ancestors. And in addition, we want to honor, even though this are the ancestors, we also honor the born day of Carmichael, of founders of the PAIGC, and also Don Pedro Albizu Campos, who's one of the leaders of the Puerto Rican independence movement, the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. And also Campos himself has a local touch for me because there's a mural pretty close which is a painting of Campos and Che Guevara, and we're trying to save it against the ravages of gentrification. So if you ever been in East Harlem and you see those two faces, you know, it's all about understanding that even though Guevara and Campos had different philosophies, that it's representing the tie that Cuba and Puerto Rico have, and understanding that they're two wings of the same bird, as we call it. And I'm gonna pass it off to Comrade Jamilah for some anniversaries. So.
There's a lot of anniversaries happening. I want to, before getting into the anniversaries, you may have heard about the prison break in Israel, in the max security prison in Israel, and they use spoons and they're calling it the Freedom Tunnel. And I'm like, that's what's up. Using spoons, okay? People talking, I can't do this, I can't do that. You have people in max security in Israel use spoons to escape, and they're still looking for them. Come on, y'all. That's what's up. That is what's up. So some other things that are happening before we get into the anniversary. I'm sure you've also heard about the coup happening in Guinea. And it's very similar to what's happened in Haiti, where someone's like, oh, I'm not going to give up my post or whatever when it's against the people's will. And so you had someone who's like, okay, I'm going to be there. Alpha Conde was like, no, I'm going to have my third term, even though you're not supposed to have a third term. It's against the Constitution or whatever. And then he said, okay, we're going to have a coup. And so also what happened with the Arab Spring. So you see this going on in relation to US policy all the time, where you have agents of the CIA, et cetera, people who are upholding US imperialist policy, be figures in the government, but somehow they're not, doing enough of the bidding of the US government. And so they're displaced by someone else who was trained by said governments. In this case, Israel, in the case of Guinea, Israel, France, the US. And so that is happening right now. There's a lot of things happening in terms of coups right now. And I'm sure people have also heard about what's happened in Peru, where you had the socialist, I don't know, I don't want to call it takeover. It's like the will of the people have spoken. And so it is essentially a socialist takeover. I know when people say takeover, it has negative connotations, but it really doesn't. I think having a socialist takeover is a good thing. So with that, you had in more recent times, the socialist takeover, but what has recently happened was the physical transition of someone who was involved in the Marxist-Leninist revolution in Peru. And so you had his name was Abimael Guzman, or he was called Chairman Gonzalo or Comrade Gonzalo. And he was one of the people who founded the Communist Party of Peru. And of course, because of his actions, his political actions, he became a political prisoner. The interesting thing is, of course, you have the whole September 11th thing happening. You have all of this stuff happening right now. So you had Attica, September 9th. Attica. So September 9th, Attica. In the case of Chairman Gonzalo, on September 12th, 1992, which was 29 years ago, he was captured and imprisoned under the Alberto Fujimori regime. And that was under DIRCOTE, or DIRCOTE, or the National Directorate Against Terrorism. Sound familiar? And in 2018, he was actually sentenced for the second time for life in prison in relation to the Tirada bombing, and that happened in 1992. So on September 11th, 2021, Chairman Gonzalo did physically transition. But it is interesting that he transitioned on September 11th, 2021, when he was sentenced in 2018 in relation to this bombing, but also captured and imprisoned on September 12th, 1992. I just think those dates are very interesting in relation to Chairman Gonzalo. I don't know if anyone else does. So other anniversaries, if you will, there was the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. That happened August 29th, 2005. But now folks in New Orleans are dealing with Hurricane Ida right now. And there's lots of help that people need in terms of supplies, in terms of dealing with housing, that kind of stuff. That's happening in terms of recent news. With anniversaries, there's the 60th anniversary of the Azanian People's Liberation Army, or the APLA. It's the 37th anniversary of the independence of Guinea-Bissau. You have the coup in Chile, 1973, when you want to talk about US policy. And so you had Pinochet, the rise of Pinochet with that. And there were massive repercussions with the existence of a Pinochet regime. You also had Peter Tosh's murder that happened around this time. And of course, the Attica revolts. And that was September 9th, it's the 50th anniversary. So there are some things that have occurred around this time. And most notably, particularly if you live in the United States, it is the 20th year since what you call, Evan, is the deep event. So I want you to talk about why you call it the deep event.
I call it a deep event. First off, if you've followed any sort of what's called deep politics, which is basically understanding that, yes, there are, like, you see the politics, you can see people voting, people electioneering, so on and so forth, but there are events, and I know this, especially in mainstream, particularly like mainstream liberal media, got a bit of a bad rap called the deep state. And it's basically, and if I recall correctly, the origins of the deep state come with regards to the it was like in the 70s and 80s, the national security, so the national security infrastructure in Turkey, which is trying to undermine the left wing rebellion, as well as like Kurdish self-determination. And there were coups, there were assassinations, so forth, held by various parts of the what's called, that they call it the deep state. And something similar to that occurred in Italy, which is called the Years of Lead. It was the 70s and it has a lot to do with Operation Gladio, which was involved with supposedly stay-behind armies to ward off a European invasion by the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, but it ended up basically using either mafia or mob ties and the far right or fascist groups, militias, to attack people, attack governments in other places, and then put that blame on communist revolutionaries who they were doing some rebellion against the ruling class, but at the same time they staged assassinations and terror events, but they tend to put blame on those left-wing groups. So the reason it's called a deep event is that if you see all the stuff about the 9/11 2001, you say, oh, how could this happen? How could this be? And the reason it's called deep event is, especially if you read some of the works like Peter Dale Scott, he talks a lot about how this book I'm reading, and he talks about the role of like the CIA and other agencies, and how they were involved with groups of Al Qaeda, involved with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, especially the ISI, their intelligence agencies, as well as oil companies and Wall Street companies, and the use of some of those Islamic fundamentalists, especially in Chechnya and former Yugoslavia. Sorry about that noise. It's another one, but basically a lot of ties between various banks and companies and intelligence agencies who they use that to basically try to accomplish their goals, but then either from obviously there's a lot more out there. Just it would be a whole nother episode, but basically as a result of different sort of either claims of responsibility or different goals that some people they have captured who doing acts, they let them go. And if you especially if you know some events were the reason it happened in snakes, that how often they have an FBI agent working with someone to do something, and you hear, oh, someone's shot, and he has an FBI agent with him, and you wonder, it's funny how that always happens. But again, and we say that there's a lot of connections between all these different things, all these foreign policy fits to undermine communist governments or groups, and all of a sudden And there's always other things like the missing trillions of dollars, about people taking out work, and all kinds of like different like exercises that happened before then, and so it's a deep event because there's like the mainstream narrative of, oh, Al Qaeda tried to come and attack our land, attack our country, and but if you look deep down, you understand that the capitalist class, if at least either, I guess, and depending on like what you read, they either let it happen or they have they didn't plan on this happening, and regardless of that the mainstream narrative, this is all like total buffoonery, is bollocks basically, and use that to crack down, about the Patriot Act, about the so-called war on terror, and as attack attacking animal liberation groups, attack anarchists and socialists, as well as like other people just trying to fight for self-liberation, and using their own conspiracy theories, which is funny. Like I usually talk about in other episodes of how conspiracy theories used to say that, oh, you just like, if you feel like mainstream, they say, oh, you're just wacky, you're just trying to think everything's connected, or you're trying to do some. But and so one thing we talked about is that conspiracy and class power, they're not opposed to each other. They're well connected. That in order for the ruling class to gain power, they have to interact with each other to say, okay, how can we keep this? And it's sort of same thing. If you one person like to talk is Mike Parente. He talk about like, if like people are organizing, if like teachers or peasants or domestic workers or so on, they're trying to organize to like improve the conditions and form revolutionary potential, they have to like meet together. So what makes you think that the people who run the various factories, the various banks, the various ports and all that, what makes you think they don't do anything? But what's the Business Roundtable? What's the Chamber of Commerce? What's the CIA? Like some people call it like capitalist international army, or criminals in action, as our brother Kamara John would call it. So if you think that, and heck, like conspiracy theory used that way is something from the CIA, which is funny enough. So and again, it's a deep event because there are a lot of things that, a lot of aspects of ruling class trickery and so on that lead up to an event that it's not just a sudden bit of like blowback, which it has its own like kind of racial undertones, but it's something that is beyond something that you can like vote on. Like, you can't vote to say, I don't want you to have this attack. Like, I don't want you to start the BCCI bank. I don't want you to have people I don't want you to join with some Wahhabi groups in Albania. I don't want you, like, you can't really vote on that. It's like you got to do something deeper. So that's where you get that explanation. And it goes back to stuff like Iran-Contra. It goes back to various assassinations like JFK, RFK, Martin King, Malcolm X, and so on. And you think about, and like you was talking about, Jamilah was talking about the coups, and like how like so many different actors are part of some of like the same thing. So that makes it deep.
Yo, that was deep, bro. Yeah. I wanted to mention, I think it might be for a film series. I can't remember if it's an episode, but our comrades in the New Mexico chapter are actually doing something on what's happening in Guinea, speaking of like Mamadou and being trained by, U.S. forces or that. So I wanted to mention that before I forgot. So I think, yeah, they are doing something in relation to that, in relation to the coup with Mamadou and, taking over from Alpha Conde and everything. but I know we are going to talk about your man, Jeffrey.
Yes, sir.
Kwame Ture. So I know you have been waiting for this episode. I just wanted to say, before you get into it, because you will, and I want to hear you get into it. My introduction to Kwame Ture, besides being in the Panthers and everything, is this book, and this is the OG book, so it's got the slave name on it. So this was my introduction to Kwame Ture. I know they reissued the book and it says Kwame Ture and Charles B. Hamilton, but yeah. So this is I think that people do look at his speeches a lot on YouTube, but I think it's even more compelling reading those words. I think those things should be combined. And there is a question I want to ask to open it up after we all hear about how you all came to know Kwame Ture. But there is a specific speech we're going to talk about in addition to his words. But I do have a question, so don't make me forget that I have that question. How did you get into Kwame Ture? How were you introduced to Kwame Ture?
Yeah,
Jeffrey.
Oh yeah. For me, it was I believe it was a Twitter clip or something. I've seen his name come up, and I started looking at following more radical accounts about around this time. This was probably 2019 going into 2020. And I would just see stuff and I'm like, oh, this guy seems interesting. He's speaking the truth. He's spitting hot fire, as everyone was saying that. I'm like, all right. And then it wasn't until last year, that I really dug in heavy, I believe, early last year. And then I went on a binge. And it's funny because I thought I was the only one where I would start with one video and just watch 10. But I literally talked to other people as of recently and over the past few years. And it's just everyone does that, and I stumbled across this video in particular, thinking that I've watched every Kwame Ture video out there possible, and it looks like I haven't. So I came across it just looking for some of his content, and I seen this one. I was like, man, and Kwame Ture actually is the reason why I'm in the A-APRP. He made me feel so guilty for not organizing. I'm like, man, I gotta do something. He's like, you're not doing nothing for you people. Shut up. I'm like, dang, he's right. I can't talk about this stuff if I'm not working for the people. So, he was right. And then as of recent, I dropped the book. I haven't been reading it yet, but I think I'm almost 200 pages in, ready for the revolution. Me and the comrade Jamilah was talking about this. I don't have a glare, but there we go. That's better. Yeah. So yeah, this book is amazing. This is I'm actually gonna go backwards. I'm gonna read this and then go back to from Black Power to Pan-Africanism, and then I'm gonna read Black Power after that. So yeah, man, the GOAT, Kwame Ture, man. I think at this point, hopefully I watched all his videos. I think I watched every single one. I don't know. But yeah, man, I'm excited for this episode. This is, yeah.
You are a Kwame Ture stan. He would probably not want that, but you are.
Yeah, two people, Kwame Ture. Well, actually, maybe three now, maybe four. Kwame Ture, Malcolm X, Kwame Nkrumah, and Stokely Ture. Those are those four, yeah. Yeah, man, there's something to me. So I'll let you speak, Evan.
Yeah, I've heard of him before, a year passing, Kwame Ture, Stokely, Carmichael, all about Black Power and stuff. And I think you, Jeffrey, I started watching some of his speeches on YouTube, and I also got Black Power a few years ago. I read that, and I also borrowed from Black Power to Pan-Africanism on the library app. And reading through that, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And it was great seeing his evolution of this thought and seeing how sometimes, especially if you're getting into any kind of politics, but especially if you're getting into revolutionary politics, that you think that these people all of a sudden, they one day it's oh, I got this, but you realize that it takes time. But they're studying, they're working, they read someone else's thoughts on the situation, then they apply it, and they say, oh, maybe it could do something different, and they work with that, and understanding that a lot of what they have the inspirations they have, and you follow that, and then you work with other people. You might work with someone and you bring up something that you never thought. You're like, oh, okay, I never thought about it. And then it gets you understanding, and like especially reading Black Power, Pan-Africanism, and seeing how you translate that even in this early like in the earlier speeches and stuff, that even though they speak about Pan-Africanism like he is like it was when he was part of the A-APRP, that he still had the practice of yes, we gotta have our power here, but it's also connected. There's also you see this sort of like this reaching out. It's like he's not there, but he's just reaching. I was like, oh, okay, I feel it, and it's like, oh yes, I got it. So if we want power, we got to hold our continents. We got to liberate. So yeah, so that's how I got with Ture. So
yeah. So the speech that we're gonna focus on today is from Albany State College in Albany, Georgia, and it was made on April the 5th, 1988.
No African coming to America voluntarily got on the boats to come to America and chose anything. And no African getting on the slave boat was running from anything in Africa. Not from religious persecution, not from economic oppression, nothing. Africa had stabilized, civilized states way past the civilization of Europe. Thus, no African got on the boat. Everyone was carried to America in the most horrendous conditions that mankind has ever seen. And yet today, those who voluntarily left Europe, loved Europe, those who were dragged away from Africa, hate Africa. This is the tragedy of the American capitalist system. It teaches you to hate yourself for no reason at all, except to continue exploiting you by keeping you divided.
I know, we're talking about standing and everything, but it just made me think dialectically even about Kwame Ture and the organizing work that he did, and all the speeches he gave were recruitment tools. But I don't think that people necessarily look at them in that way. So if you look at all the videos that he made, which is why I think it's important to also read his works, because every time he talks, people are like, yeah, amen, yeah, and people are just clapping and clapping and clapping. But the question is, how many people will research anything he's talking about? Because that dude all day could be giving declarative statements. And everyone's just like, yay, because I simply agree with it in some way, or I think he sounds right, or he's charismatic. But he could totally be wrong on everything. And Kwame Ture is well researched, so that's very clear. And that's very clear, because that's what he says it, right? So, but he says himself in speeches, you don't have to believe me, you look it up. But people still, I don't think, take the time to look things up based on their belief systems. So I think that's also dangerous and telling in the way people look at media today. So I think it's amazing that you, Jeffrey, and other folks I've heard did become inspired to organize because of Kwame Ture, but how many people are doing that? I'm hoping a lot of people do, but when I'm seeing these speeches, everyone just clapping, and he's even saying, oh, y'all not gonna organize. And then even in this speech, he says, if you're not gonna join the A-APRP, join the NOI. If you're not gonna join the NOI, join another organization. But how many people are just kind of taking the words in, and then they're going right out, and then people just keep going to these speeches and be like, yeah, that's right, because one of the reasons I'm saying this as well, in relation to the echo chamber, and thinking about Kwame Ture dialectically, is Sean Combs, Puffy, Puff Daddy, whatever you want to call him, he posted on social media, and we know what his values are, but he even posted a portion of a Kwame Ture speech. And he did it in a way which is totally against what Kwame Ture stood for. So anybody could post anything on social media, and people can have seen him speak and clap and everything, but how many people are really taking heed to his words and doing research on the things that he's talking about? So that's the opening question to this speech and other speeches that he gave. I would love to know what y'all think about that.
Yeah, I think especially in this like hyper, information age with technology and social media, everyone is looking for like fast food information, or like people have short attention spans. So there's like something to just satisfy me for like the 2 minutes I'm watching this clip, or this 1 minute. Oh yeah, I feel good. Like, and that would happen to me, before I came across Kwame Ture, because people would just point things out or have clips or just say quick things to just make you feel good in a moment. And you're just like, all right, I'm just go out and just keep doing what I was doing. Like, but Kwame Ture was direct and said, this is the call to action. You have to organize. We're disorganized. Like everything you listen to, he says the same thing. He's very particular about that. So then it makes you, for me, I'm the type of person that, I question things like, okay, so how does this work practically? And who's Kwame Ture? And, that's when I started getting his books and stuff, and started reading Ready for the Revolution and watching his videos like all day sometimes, hours and hours of his videos. So I think it's important for people to understand concepts, because even what you said, like with Diddy, he took a clip of Black Power, but then people have, their own version of what Black Power means, like economic, tying yourself into the capitalist system is, Black Power and right? But I think that's why I think a lot of times you have to get out the whole notion of just like taking in clips or reading the headline of an article and not really like digging in deeper and understanding what it means. But I think it all has to do with the times we're in, and I don't think it's just us two at this time. I think you can kind of regulate it into any time period too as well. That people could see certain things like the head of a newspaper and be like, oh, like this is what it is. Well, I read the headline and this is what it meant. So, so I think it's important for people to definitely do their research and homework, because, you would, if anyone who dug into Kwame Ture would know whatever Black Power Diddy was talking about was the complete opposite of what he meant, So people are going to like, who don't know about Kwame Ture and just came across that clip, are going to assume that, Kwame Ture is some guy who advocates for capitalism and thinks that, we should invest our money in whatever. So yeah, do your homework, y'all.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing is, especially with regards to Kwame Ture, is that a lot of people don't know that he was part of the A-APRP for 30+ years. Like they know, like if they, like a lot of people might even know about him, or they might still about Stokely Carmichael, but they know Black Power, as you talk about Jeffrey and Jamilah, that he's a Black Power, Black Power, right on. But like we talk about you get these clips, you get these like the spectacles of, I see this quote with Kwame's face. I got this quote. You don't know what the context was. You don't know if it's the right quote. You don't even know if it matches with him. But again, I still save, like I see like quotations from the revolutionary elders and ancestors, and save them, and that's fine. It's just understanding that you have to like go deeper, like what was the context of what they said, and if they said it, and going back to right, like you don't, like the fact that you don't know about the fact that he was in the A-APRP for 30+ years and went back home, and like some of the research I've done of Ture, like they sort of make it as if he was trying to run away, and which is like a laughable thing, that like going back to the motherland is somehow running away. You don't get the context of what the United States like agencies were trying to do. You don't get the fact that he was trying to, like, if you speak about the unification of Africa, you don't go. It obviously, of course, like Marcus Garvey spoke about Africa, like the United States of Africa and so on, but wasn't able to go again because like they didn't want him there. But still, like if you plan on trying to unify the continent, it helps to be on the continent, And I think it's funny because I actually saw someone who talked about how there's this tendency to see like the ancestors and elders, look up, like you praise them, you stand for them, you have fandom, you celebrate this celebrity type culture with them, that you sort of like defend them, like if they say something that might disagree with some views. But again, like if you're not doing that work, if you're not reading like the whole coda of their work, of what they're doing, then then of course you're gonna like look at them and say, oh, they must be always right. Like I like them, they're always right. But but if you actually do like work study, you actually doing organizing work, that you understand that you gotta look at everything. You gotta see like other people think. And if you don't, and another thing is, if you don't have some kind of ideology to sort of shape what their thoughts are, then you don't know how to criticize them. So if you don't, since we're Kwame Ture, like if you don't have the ideology backing, and you read something, and you see if it disagrees with it or whatever, like you have to engage with it. See, is this something is this difference something from, was it something that I missed? Was it something that's a disagreement? Was it something where they had this belief or there's this thought and then transfer something else? Did they find some material evidence that proves it differently? So again, it's a long process, and sometimes we're so ready to get to the next thing, whether to like just get the next bite to eat, get the next place to live, just did this for help with other people, that we often don't have that time to sort of synthesize everything in a way that has this long-term thought behind it. So I think that's a big reason.
Yeah, I think too sometimes if you don't read the whole story, like I came across a Kagame quote earlier on Twitter, and it was just crazy. People was championing like, "Oh yeah, Kagame, yeah." And it's, mind you, like this. So he was saying, if the owners of the natural resources go around begging, then you should know there's something wrong with their minds. Mind you, Kagame is out here a part of the whole, extracting resources out of the Congo with Museveni and Uganda for multinational corporations in the West. But he's going ahead and saying this. But those who don't understand and the political implications of what Kagame is doing or his history, then you could just see that, or you could see like, an old video of Idi Amin just, wearing some type of cultural garment and dancing around and being happy and stuff. And then you're like, oh, this guy was he cared about African culture, and he cares about the people. Look at him, he's with the people. So that's why it's important to dive in deeper into what you're saying. So you see stuff about Kwame Ture, you see about anybody, even if it's someone you see everyone is championing, and you have to understand, because they could be nuances to their politics or what they're doing, essentially, that could be oppressive or whatever the case is. So that goes into the importance of just digging in and not just seeing things on the surface level.
Absolutely. With that, because I think that reflects pretty much everything Kwame Ture says in this speech on April 5th, 1988. And the key is about, when you hate Africa, then you hate yourself. It's essentially what Marcus Garvey was talking about, what Malcolm X was talking about. It's along those lines. And he opens with history. He talks about history and how it can never be made by any one man. And so what capitalism trains us to think is that one man, and it's always man, of course, one man can change society. One man can change the world. That's usually the image we get from films, the images we get from books. And the overarching thing is still, even when they emphasize one man, it's still systems that are involved when you read in between the lines of the novel, when you read in between the lines of the script. It's still societies that need to be changed. And it's always the people that get left out that change the system. Even, when talking about Martin Luther King, I remember seeing when it first came out, the Selma movie, I think it was Selma, right? And they had the picture of Martin Luther King out in front and then everybody in back of him. And I'm like, yeah. So what?
Ava, what are you doing?
Right. So what Kwame Ture actually says, because he asks about who makes history, and he says, not King, but the people whose names we do not recall. And the names of the people whose names we can't recall were in the back on that poster. But Martin Luther King was the person we're supposed to emphasize and love. And of course, he was considered to be a communist, an enemy of the state, all of this stuff. And Martin Luther King also emphasized how the people create change, the people change history. And to leave that part of Martin Luther King out, that makes no sense, but it happens all the time. And so Kwame Ture also says you have a responsibility to help make history. And so even with that, he is calling for organization, because he straight up says it at the end of the speech, but he's being consistent and principled by not necessarily saying the word organization, but he's saying history can never be made by any one man. He also says you have a responsibility to help make history. And the other thing that is pivotal in every single Kwame Ture speech I have seen, he says we, he never says I. So he is one person who is organizing with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, a mass party. That is what we are working to develop into. So that is the consciousness he has. And that has always been amazing to me, that he says, thank you, we are glad to be here. We are doing this, we are that. So that's not very common. How often do y'all see that when somebody says we? And somebody who says we is massively committed to the struggle and understands the struggle cannot be done individually.
Yeah, I think it just shows the communal aspect that, or mentality that Ture had. He wasn't trying to individualize. Like, even though I know I said Malcolm, Ture, Sekou Ture and Kwame Ture is like, some of the people who are like, oh man, these are great people. But there was organizations behind these people. They were in organizations. There were people who did work with them. Like, it's kind of like in the same speech that Kwame Ture says, as much as we love Malcolm, you put Malcolm out there to go fight by himself against the enemy, it's not gonna, he's gonna lose 10 times out of 10. I put money on it. I know we like to valorize Malcolm and whoever, but he's not Superman. So, yeah. So yeah, like, people's gonna do work. Like, I even think about the formation of SNCC and reading Ready for the Revolution. Like, Ella Baker had a big part in that too as well. So it's like Martin didn't just go and do it himself. Like, he had people around him to tell him, like, okay, you need to reach out to the youth and the students. Like, that's an aspect of the community that we need, in the front lines in the struggle. So, Ella Baker's not talked about too much, depending on the level of consciousness someone has. So, people don't really talk about her, or just in general, like, people don't talk about the people who are in the background really doing the work. Like, I know people see the A-APRP and they may know a few people in the party, but there's a lot of people in the background that are contributing to, what we have now and, what we're going to do in the future. So I think it's also important to also just, talk about, when we say these names, also attach the organizations they were assigned with, so people understand that it wasn't just, there we go. I need that book. I need that book. I'm actually going to order it probably this week. Now that you put it there. But yeah, so I think that's important. That's what I try to do a lot of the times. Like, when I say Sekou Ture, I say Sekou Ture in the PDG, or, and I say Malcolm, I mentioned, the OAAU, and so forth and so on. So I try to always mention their organizations when I say their name, because we're brought up in a system that just teaches us one person did everything. In a history class, Benjamin Franklin and Abe Lincoln and settlers and slave owners. So, well, anyway, but this is just to drive home the point of how they just talk about one person, and then we just all think that one person did one thing in history, and that's not how it works. So.
And in addition, it is also points out the importance of having a dialectical materialist outlook of analysis. That even, yes, there are like some incredible people who are out there who have principles, who do these like incredible things to help the masses of people. At the same time, they're not out there separately from what these organizations are. They're not out there separately from the times they're in. So you have to understand that you look at the material conditions and they're doing this thing. And then you can't just copy and paste what they're doing. I know I say copy and paste, but again, like, you just can't just say, oh, I look at what Martin Luther King did, I'll just do the same thing. Or, oh, I see what Asa Ture did, I'll just do the same thing. Like, the things that, like, yeah, there's some lessons you can take, but again, you have to see what the material conditions are around. You have to see what's happening around you, and yeah, they might have some wonderful things and incredible things that relate to what's happening in the world right now. But at the same time, you have to say, I might have to do something different, or I have to do something in a different way. And again, like in that speech, he also talks about like George Washington, like talk about all these like founding fathers of America. Like George Washington went against the British by himself. Yeah, he'd be hung, he'd be hanged. So. So there was an army with Washington. There was an army, and all these other people that are there to like support like that counter revolution anyway. So not just like for a revolution or anything, but all the other organizations like as I talked about earlier, like the ruling class, they organize themselves. So to think that one person can fight against that is ridiculous. It's idealistic.
Yeah, it's idealistic and defeatist. Think that you could fight a whole system by yourself. Think you're Superman or whatever. It just doesn't. Superman is fiction, people. Let's remember that. The other thing that I think was again, he says a lot of the same things in many speeches, and he has a way of, in some cases, saying them very differently. That's the one thing I respected what Kwame Ture was very consistent in his message. And he talks about being ignorant of world history if you are ashamed of Africa, given that Africa is primary, Africa is the cradle of civilization, Africa contributes to powering so much of what we use, the resources existing in Africa. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be in the place we are today. So to not understand that, to not recognize the contributions of Africa to this day, and to understand the relationship to imperialism, to what is happening with Africa, you are ignorant of world history. And to say, I'm not African, I'm American, I'm this, I'm that, you are ignorant of world history. I love how he put that. And in relation to that, he talked about being spectators in our own oppression. So when you are using American exceptionalism, if you keep asking these questions, but don't do anything about it, if you keep saying there's a problem, but do not organize with the masses to deal head on with that problem, you are spectators in your oppression. I love how he put that. So let's discuss that. Being spectators in our oppression, what that means.
It reminds me of Asada Shakur's book when she says, like, the less you think about your oppression, the more you're okay with it, like the more you accept it, right? So it's like people want to deal with escapism when you talk about the oppression we face and whatever. So you have that aspect to it. You have the aspect of people who identify, okay, we are oppressed people, but just stick with that part of it, just identifying and calling it out and not taking action against it. You know, he kind of states it in several times, like, by the action of your inaction, you are against your people because you're doing nothing. You're just watching them. It's like if you could stop someone from burglarizing, your parents' home or something like that, you just sit there and spectate and like, oh, that's interesting. They're robbing my family, but you don't do anything to try to stop or help, like personally, or do something, if you have the ability to, obviously, there's certain circumstances where you don't, but if you do have the ability, and I think we all have the ability to try to organize or join the organization, obviously, if we have the capacity to. So I think that's actually what we're taught. And I think that's what's actually been socialized, that we just do. Like, everyone just gets on social media and just like, oh yeah, rant, to do it for likes and tweets and yeah, oh my God. But it's like, all right, after all the retweets and notoriety, and maybe you may have got someone to read books and stuff like that, but like, is there a call to action in what you're doing? Are you trying to tell people to organize? Is there an objective of this? Because, at the end of the day, we still deal with the same problem where we mobilize, but we don't have no ideology backing it. We have no objective because we're not in organizations, because an organization will give you those things. There's no collective consciousness being built in work study groups or anything. It's just, oh yeah, someone did this, so I'm gonna burn the building down. And yes, burn burn it down, burn it all down. But at the same time, there has to be a higher objective to what we're doing. We can't just move in like reactionaries and just expect things are going to change because we burn buildings down and stuff like that. We have it's way more layered than that. Imperialism is still going to be around after we burn a few buildings, so we have to deal with that reality after that. So just sitting here and just talking about it solely, or just wanted to escape from it and say, oh, there's nothing we could do or whatever. Like, yeah, like you have to organize. You have to get some political education. You have to do work in the organization to defeat these powers. Once again, no one person can do it. So,
and to go further on your point, is it also speaks about this individualism that you should, like, even before we have social media or for internet, you have like people making a speech or doing this, and oh wow, like Jamilah was speaking earlier, like, yeah, making a speech, okay, now what? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, and you see this you see this especially like online. Are you going back to online that like people say, oh, did you see this John Oliver clip about something? And again, like, okay, yeah, it's a good breakdown, but what's the lead up to it? Like, it's like some sort of reformist action, some form of reformist action, or the fact that you shared it is like, oh, I did my, like, as you talk about, Jeffrey, that you did your duty, but is that really your duty? Like, yeah, and you see this, you've seen this a lot with certain people, especially with guys like the police violence. They have like, we gotta share this, or you see this like what happens on the continent, some Arab, some European, some Asian person does something against the Africans. Oh, you see what they're doing? You see this? You see that's why we got no friends. Blah blah blah. Okay, so what organization you can do to make sure they stop it? Like, what are you gonna do? Or they talk about, oh, you see this? Like, our leaders are so bad. Like, okay, well, leaders come from somewhere. Like, you're just gonna wait for a good leader? Like, come on, like, it's just like sometimes I sympathize with Jamilah, like, why it's not so for me, because you see even people like explore like good points, and it's just like, okay, yeah, you made the point, but now what? It's just,
yeah, you see that so many times. We have no friends, and anti-blackness is everywhere. Oh my God. It is like, all right, like if your theory is correct, what are you doing to stop this? Like what, like even if this is so, it's in some cases, in a lot of cases, the whole friends thing is a fallacy. But even if that is true, it's like, all right, so what are you doing to collectively help us get power, right? So it's just like people just like talking and feeling good and getting likes and followings, and there's no call to action aside of them trying to sell you something. Like, oh yeah, after you follow me, buy some crystals from me. Like, buy this, Cash App link in the bio. Like, like, yeah, send me money. Like, it's no like, oh, join this organization. It's kind of like, yeah, I want some money from y'all after I give y'all this knowledge, quote unquote.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's really funny because he does mention Libya in the speech, and he says, well, where's Libya? It's in Africa. And when people talk about we have no friends, there's literally no class analysis in what they're talking about, because not all kinfolk, as they say. And if you look at things based on phenotype, if you look at things based on location, these fake borders, if you look on things based on these superficialities, that's why people support Obama, even though he is an enemy of African people. They're like, well, he can go to Ghana in 2009 and say, oh, don't blame colonialism for the problems of Africa. Oh, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, tie your shoes and get, that is who you support just because he's African phenotypically? Come on, and then people would just consistently excuse him. Oh, well, Black love and all of this. And I just, and one thing I heard, I didn't even know about this. Apparently there was some, and I heard this from Onyesamu and crew, but Beyonce had a Tiffany diamond.
Yeah.
So y'all heard about the I'm not on
It
social
was a
media,
super
but-
big thing on social media. Like people
Yeah,
going,
I did not know. I'm not
Yo,
on social media like that.
you say anything aside from Beyonce is the greatest on social media, people would come to your house and like threaten you, and like they would listen.
They call it the Beehive for a reason.
Yeah. Like they will start protesting outside of your house. Literally, I swear to God. Like one of my friends on Twitter said something about it, you know, like in relation to like that's a blood diamond, and oh God, the Beehive, why she didn't know, and like she's yeah. I'm like, man, this is So yeah, that's this
Symbolism.
Yeah.
So she couldn't trace the history of a Tiffany diamond to understand how anti-African that is. And y'all are supporting her on that, given her and her husband's history? Yes, okay. See,
and apparently she came out and said she didn't know. She came out herself.
That's what Stevie Wonder said about the IDF. That's what they all said. How many times can you say that?
Exactly.
I didn't know. It's like Rihanna, at one end she's like free Palestine, and then people, gave her trouble for that, and she takes it back. It's just like, I am not one of those people who are like, celebrities shouldn't talk about politics. No, everything's political. So I want to know where you stand politically. I don't care. Whatever side you're on, I want to know. That said, there is a connection. If you look at, the civil rights movement, or you look at what happened with the Free Azania movement, the anti-apartheid movement, celebrities were all over that. There was a cause. People joined organizations. People helped to financially contribute to organizations. There was the whole thing with the USO in the 1930s or whatever. So to say that celebrities shouldn't be involved in politics, that's absolutely wrong, because historically that's factually incorrect. So you could say, I don't agree with the politics, but to say you just need to shut up and act or sing, like, that's just historically wrong. And for these celebrities to tie themselves into these contracts where they have to uphold capitalism, that's on them. They are very aware, unless they're not reading the contracts they sign, that's an issue. But they know that they have to uphold capitalism. To play ignorant is no. Like, they know exactly what they are signing into, because they see it themselves before they sign into it. So to say, well, I didn't know about the Tiffany diamond or whatever, even if you on some basic level have not heard of anything regarding Tiffany diamond, you have heard the phrase blood diamonds. Just even on that basic level. And so to say, well,
Kanye had a song about that.
Oh, right, I know, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
There was a movie called Blood Diamond. So to not even
and Jay-Z was on it.
Oh yeah, wasn't Jay-Z on that Dead Prez song too? So so to not even have a basic understanding of the legacy of blood diamonds and how Africans are exploited, and to be the first or second African woman to, like, that should tell you everything right there. If you were the first or second African woman to hold this diamond, like that, you can't even read through that. So these people defending these celebrities that are participating in petty bourgeoisness and upholding the system of oppression, which is anti-African, that should not be defended. You could say, I like her music. You could say all that. And, we all have contradictions or whatever, but to defend someone politically when they are extremely problematic, no. Like, that's the thing. That's why I asked the question, open with the question about thinking dialectically, even about Kwame Ture and celebrity culture, because people do uphold him in some funny way as this celebrity icon. But they love him and they post him on social media and they quote him, but they do not follow exactly what he's saying. They do not take heed to what he's saying. And so this is the same thing that I feel like people put Kwame Ture in the same league as Beyonce in a lot of ways because of instantaneous culture, and people just want to grab onto something because we are oppressed. I need something to hold on to. But literally, there are people historically who have done this work, and you are not following them. The shoulders that we stand on, I don't understand how you can say Kwame Ture and Beyonce. This is, no, they are not the same. They are not cut from the same cloth at all. So you can say whatever you want. You have somebody who's saying, I am organizing with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And then you have someone over here doing a performative wokeness, trying to honor the Black Panther Party at the Super Bowl. How is that one and the same? Someone who literally died organizing. He had cancer and was just like, I am organizing till the day I leave this earth. And then you have somebody who's like, oh, Tiffany Diamond. They are not one and the same. I don't care what anybody says. Come for me, whatever. I'm already in a wheelchair with like a leg and a half. What are you going to do? They are not one and the same. Go ahead, sting me. I do not care. Buzz, 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 buzz. Go ahead.
Yeah, man. I mean, you said it the best. Like, one is, working to organize Africans, to liberate Africans. One is just, doing things for aesthetics to get bigger pieces of the capitalist pie. So it's like, yeah, I don't know how people could equate that. I mean, it just goes back to what we were saying earlier, like people don't really study these things or these people. So, and it's just it just shows our disorganization as a whole, as a people. That's all this really shows every time I see these type of things. It's like, yeah, because there's no way you could utter those two names in the same sentence. Unless you're saying Kwame Ture is against Beyonce and everything she stands for. That's the only way those two names could go in the same sentence. Other than that, they don't belong together. They don't belong together. But I think that goes to say too, like, it doesn't even mean that there's no one who's considered like a musician. Like you said, like there's Harry Belafonte, you have Tupac, who was actually like linked with the Panthers, and he did community work as well, with like gangs and things of that nature. With Tula Shakur, stepdad. Yep. Yeah, Napo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was the leader of the organization before too as well. So, man, there's musicians historically who've done things, that were aiding the revolution. Organizations. Was it? Go ahead.
Sister Miriam Makeba.
Oh, Makeba. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not like it's impossible for musicians. I think Nkrumah and others, I've actually identified, every part of our society has a role that they can play. Even if it's, the petty bourgeois, whatever, there's even elements within them that they can play a role within the revolution if, they commit class suicide, obviously. So,
Well, wait, Jeffrey, so this is the thing, because with Nkrumah Tureism, we talk about having a social revolution, we talk about the African personality, and the arts does include that. And how any revolution, like we can look at what happened with Cuba, and we can again look at what happened with the liberation movement in Tanzania. Use art to fuel the revolution, use art to fuel organizing. And you look at how art is fueled in capitalist society. So just from what you said, I think that's a very interesting point in how art is used. So Beyonce is still being upheld, even though she's kind of out of the spotlight or whatever at this point for the most part, but she's still, when she enters the scene, she's doing a Tiffany Diamond and people, or I guess, was it Sawiti? I am not on social media and I don't follow a lot of this stuff, but I guess she's making a deal with McDonald's. And so there was a really good article in Hood Communist about that, which is how I know this stuff, because I don't follow stuff. But so yeah, people are like, oh, get that bag, sis, and that is what we see as success, because people, and this is getting to what Kwame Ture was talking about as well, people are scared of organizing. I want to talk about that. So people, even Lizzo, so people focus on fat phobia when it comes to Lizzo, and like, well, let her just get her bag or whatever. But what is she doing in terms of organizing? So it's just about getting the bag. It's just about, individualism. It's about obtaining a piece of the capitalist pie, and that people don't understand that this is fueling the system itself. So when you have military ads in films, it's upholding the system. When you have people holding a Tiffany diamond, it's upholding a system and making that disconnect with the oppression of African people and Africa herself. People do not make those connections at all, versus when you had, all of these artists making songs about, not even like the probably basic examples, We Shall Overcome, but something like Fight the Power, to Arrest the President, Intelligent Hoodlum, to so many pieces of music, to just so much music out there. Dead Prez is mentioned, that do talk about these movements. There's a lot of music talking about the Palestinian liberation music. So art still exists that talks about the revolutionary struggle, but there's a focus on Beyonce. There's a focus on McDonald's Saweetie or whatever. There's a focus on Get Your Bag Lizzo. People, there's so much out there that we could explore artistically. So this idea that people should not include politics and music or whatever. Again, as y'all know, I was in the punk scene. If it wasn't for punk music, I probably wouldn't be here where I am today in terms of an analysis. Punk inspired me to get into an anti-capitalist analysis. And of course, getting into being a Pan-Africanist organizer, that's a whole different level. But you had to start from somewhere. And there were so many, like punk, it's like anti-capitalist on many levels. There's like anti-misogynist on many levels, depending on what band you listen to. But you had that. And then of course you had the folk music of the 60s where people were like, this cop man, and, so there was all of that. And then you had the Nixon era, which totally fueled that whole like anti-drug policy that happened. And of course, they merged that with the hippies and the Africans. So, people were making music as a response to that, in resistance to that system. So to say that music and politics don't mix, that is absolutely false. And what you're seeing through these streaming programs, through all of this, is just giving you whatever is the music of the day, which upholds capitalism. And I just wanted to say that from what you said, Jeffrey. I think that was.
Yeah, it's just so crazy, man. Like, that's what the system wants to do, is uphold the system. And as you see now, like, these artists are pushing the mainstream to do that. The ones who, it wasn't like early on with hip hop where you had people openly rebelling against the system as much as, not saying it's not happening now at all, but they just made sure that they put that more so on the back burner. Like that thing isn't, pushed by a lot of the companies now, at least from the hip hop, R&B side type of things. Like, yeah, it's not really pushed in the mainstream. And I think that's purposely done to push out artists who uphold capitalism and, imperialism and all these oppressive systems at the end of the day.
And before we go, I wanted to really say a little something else about people defending and attacking Lizzo. Again, there is no class analysis. So people focus on, she's a Black woman, and, people just attack her because she's fat. But even with that, the class analysis when it comes to attacking people who are not societally accepted based on weight. Like, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. And so when you're defending her based on something that's reactionary with no political analysis, we need to address that. So this is not, I'm not even, attacking any of the singers or any, I'm just saying we need to have a class analysis. We need to include that with a gender analysis, because of course with African women, there is that triple oppression. So there is that class oppression, there is that racial oppression, and there is the gender oppression. And to not to acknowledge those intersections and to just say, well, it's because of her weight or it's because she's a woman. But the question is she upholding capitalism? So that's a question we need to address. So we can say, don't attack Lizzo because you don't desire her because of whatever system has promoted desirability. Of course, it's dictated by capitalism. So of course that needs to be addressed. But we also need to question what exactly is she representing. And I think it is possible to have that conversation. But the conversations that are being had about these celebrities are very singular, they're very myopic, and they're still rooted in capitalism. So I just wanted to address that. This is not an attack on anybody, but we do need to have these conversations.
And
Your turn.
It's funny. It talked, and in the speech, he talked about like how, like, again, like this the mention of celebrity culture, like it gets conversation. It's sort of funny. Right with it, you get Jackson here, no one will show up. You get Michael Jackson here, everyone will show up.
And as a person who loves MJ, I was like, amen to that.
You'd have been one of those ones like, I'm
right.
here. Yeah.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely like, y'all see, I love MJ, but come on, he's 1 billion% right about that. You cannot deny that. So I just.
And it's like sort of interesting, it's understand like people like given like how like omnipresent this like these people are, like the pop culture is, that it's understandable that these things will get talked about, and especially in with regardless of what circle you're in, you'll mention how it relates to some kind of politics of whether it's in the Overton window or if it's outside it. But again, like if you see someone of a similar stature like out in the street, or someone, a neighbor or someone at work, and will you talk about like if you see someone who's homeless, says like do you think it sort of remind me of if as people some people might know that I watch sport, like a lot of like pro sports, and one of the things that's like been talked about, especially like it's been talked about for years, but especially this year, we see Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, and to name like two notable examples is mental health, and one thing is like, okay, like it's like, yeah, we get this conversation of mental health, but again, how does this help me? How does this help my mother? How does it help y'all? How does it help? Like, yeah, like, okay, like some athletes who, for the most part, will get some endorsements or so on, and they'll be able to take games off or matches off or whatever, take care of themselves. But if I say, oh, I have a mental health day and I lose a day of work, like I don't get that money. Or someone who's like, how well, like people will like not talk to them, or they'd be afraid of them, or they want to call the police on them. And again, like this conversation, like we get so tied up with these things, and it makes us feel good. But what are you doing about all like the fact that capitalism is a sickening system? Like we talked about in the capitalism disability, it's a sick system. It itself makes us like ill, like. The fact, like, from the food we eat, from the work conditions we have to deal with, the housing conditions we have to deal with, education, so forth, and like, yeah, like mental health gets talked about, but again, it gets individualized. Like we got, just take this medicine. Oh, just go to therapy. Oh, just do this. And again, like it doesn't take these systemic factors that you have to take care of, and it's about the role of colonization on mental health that. If you talk about the indigenous people of Turtle Island, a lot of there's issues with that, and even like with regards to the decline of European men, like of downward European men and their mental health. Again, like it's a systemic thing. Like all these things are systemic. Then you can't just talk about this mental health stuff as if like, oh, as long as we talk about it, oh, as long as we acknowledge it, like, sure, but I still gotta go to work. I still gotta do this, and yeah, that's why you need revolution.
That's right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So I want to get back to the thing you was talking about in terms of people being afraid of organizing. And with the celebrity aspect, he talks about misdirected energies. So people look to these celebrities for guidance. And in that way, it brings this cover to avoid organizing. But what exactly does that mean for you with the statement about fearing organizing? So he talks about you don't have to demonstrate your love for people on a daily basis, or you have to demonstrate your love for your people on a daily basis, which a lot of us aren't doing. And he says, if you don't do nothing for your people, you don't love your people. 1,000,000,000%. And he talks about fear, and he says, you know, we don't have fear, but under Panafricanism, the secret of life is to have no fear, but the only fear is responsibility to our people. And he also talks about, in a spiritual sense, the fear of, you know, disappointing whatever God you serve. And so with that, he talks about the fear of organizing or being scared of organizing. So I do want to discuss that. I would love to hear y'all's views on that.
I think again, it talks, like you mentioned, that sort of like who's holding us accountable, who's backing us up, and if you're not part of some collective that can say, hey, like what you did, I'm not sure if that was the right thing to do, or hey, good job, they could have done this and better. And again, like it puts the onus on you to be perfect. Like again, like we have this idea that if we from our histories, like we see, they did this, that they are somehow like magically preternaturally wonderful, or were able to organize like that. But of course, it takes a long time to do that, and sounds like how long organize. And again, like he talks about, like we mentioned about last podcast episode of like don't fear the struggle, that like sometimes it like understand that you have to like realize that it takes time, and it's like neat like to have this sort of on like it's immediate satisfaction. It's just like if I don't get this event off, then why bother? Or if someone has, or if there's some conflict, then that's bad. Like we want to make sure that everyone agrees, or everyone has this point of view. Like some of it might be this with some of the postmodernists of if I'm not like so not like African this of, and we're not joining with other people of that exact same intersection, then we can't work together because you all have different views. Which, again, that's not how you take down states. But it's really a few factors involved with it that make it seem as if we make a mistake, then it's not how we're doing. And I think again, even though like social media, like sort of like the internet, sort of has to be able to, like if someone makes a mistake, or like you get caught on video, or some tweet or some message gets caught and you say something bad, and it's like we gotta, or like again, like we talked about the so-called cancel culture, that even if it's not the cancel culture that like mainstream media talks about, there is a bit of a fear of I don't want to be like sort of like the topic of the day basically. But and even like if you talk about like on the news, or like local news, or just like around your block, like I don't want all my neighbors to talk about me, because again, I think there's always just a fear of like having this this very specific point of view, like I want to take all the blame or all the credit. But again, if you're not part of some movement of a collective, then that makes it and if you think you gotta make these like daring moves, then again it's it sort of like morphs us to think that it's about a specific point and not a long-term process.
Yeah, I think even in the sense like kind of like some of the stuff you were saying, and just to add to it, it's like, I think some people even fear it from the sense of, oh, if I join an organization or if I'm too radical, the state might kill me. And I feel like that whole like, even with the Fred Hampton movie, in a sense, I feel like that kind of instilled to some people like, oh snap, you go against the state, like this is what happens, this is what they do. This is what, what I mean? So I think from that aspect, people, and then also too, I think like just to reiterate your points, like people are looking for instant gratification, a lot of the time. So it's like, this is protracted warfare at the end of the day. So, we may not see United Socialist Africa while we're alive today, but we got to set the groundwork for the next generation and for them to take the mantle and, and so forth and so on, right? Because it's going to take a while, before that we build that type of power. So, and then before we even get to communism, so forth and so on. So, in this day and age, it's like, oh yeah, we need something that's, obviously we try to meet the material needs of people in our community, obviously. If we can, there's some points of some things that they may need, but obviously like overthrowing imperialism, capitalism, these things didn't happen to occur overnight. It's going to take a process to eliminate them, so we won't eliminate them overnight either. So.
Whoa, organizing takes time. Don't fear on the struggle too much. No, just absolutely. And that is why I do what I do, is because I want someone else after me to exist in a future where this system does not oppress them, where they have control over the means of production, where they are able to see the fall of these hierarchical systems that all of us are affected by, and to be like, well, I know it'll happen eventually, but other people are doing the work and I'm just gonna sit here and doing that. I agree with Kwame Ture, you hate your people. If you're just sitting back and watching someone else do the work, you literally hate your people. And I'm using literally in the correct way, correct way, whatever that means. But you literally hate your people because your silence is by proxy supporting the suffering of your people. I absolutely 1 billion, trillion, gazillion % agree with Kwame Ture on that point. And with what he was talking about with irresponsibility, what does that entail? Does irresponsibility just mean silence? Does that mean, holding that blood diamond? What exactly does irresponsibility entail for y'all?
I guess it's kind of what you said, aiding or abetting to, obviously we live in a world, like you stated, in contradictions, especially when we're fighting for, just society. I like, I live in a place that I have to, pay rent, whatever. It doesn't mean I support capitalism, because people like to make those, analogies like, oh, well, you live in a house, don't you? And you pay a car, so does not make you
your iPhone.
Yeah, like you participate in society, so doesn't that make you a capitalist? So we do, but I think going out your way to get pieces of other pie, like, crumbs or whatever from the capitalist pie, looking to hoard wealth, and when there's people who literally don't have homes and things of that nature, looking to exploit people and things of that nature, I think that's being irresponsible. And then also knowing better about something and then, not doing better at the same time. Like for me to understand the works of imperialism and then me to be like, well, I'm about to go join the army, guys. Like it's gonna be like that's that's a choice I made to, and like I know what the workings of U.S. imperialism is. So for me to go and do that would be against what I stand for. So it's like if you know better, you do better at the end of the day too. So I think that's where it falls into as well. So.
And to go along with like, the different levels to that like sort of irresponsibility. There's if you never find out, or you don't like have that ability to find out, then that's one thing. And then there's the people who they either refuse or they have it available but they refuse. And then you have the people who do find out. I mean, like, yeah, I'll just talk, or I'll just say some stuff. And so it's like it all depends on what you do. And also, and again, there's also a class-based, like it's all about we always have the like nation, class, gender analysis of it, that it also depends on like what are your material conditions and where you fall in line. That like if if you happen to be in the national bourgeoisie or something like that, but then you like work and you just calling for the IMF or you're calling for a trade organization to come in and help. That's different. And if they say, you know what, I'm going to go do some guerrilla warfare. And
let's talk about religion for a second, because that was a huge factor in the speech, and that's also a factor in particularly Ture's writings to connection between religion or spirituality and revolution. And he says, I love it, talks about anyone who identifies as a Christian who is against Africa is a heathen. I'm like, So, and of course people are like, yay. But I'm like, it made me wonder who was in the audience. So I was like, oh, wait, I don't know. I'm sure everybody in the audience, if they went to see him speak, did support the African liberation struggle in some way. I would hope so. But he talks about in relation to that, people without a history are dead people. But you do honestly look at a lot of African liberation struggles and colonized liberation struggles, and it is surrounded by a spiritual basis. So yeah, unless someone is a Marxist-Leninist, usually folks who are Marxist-Leninist are identified as atheists, but usually in African liberation struggle, obviously a Palestinian liberation struggle, there are folks who are Catholics who organized with the Irish liberation land struggle. So I would like to address that, because he does talk about, the roots of monotheism are based in Africa. And that's when the question hit for me, are people just agreeing with him to agree with him, or did they research that kind of stuff? Because, Kwame Ture has researched that stuff in depth. Of course, John Henrik Clarke has researched that stuff in depth, but when people talk about religion, and he mentions this as well, there are people who identify as Christians that don't even read the Bible. And I love that, because I have asked people questions, so I'll give them Bible verses and stuff. They're like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, wait, you're a Christian, you don't study? So I have a dear friend of mine, one of my closest friends. She is the one person I can talk to, and she knows where my political ideologies lie, and where I lean spiritually and everything. And she is a hardcore Christian. And she is one of the only people I know to have studied the Bible from cover to cover. And we have amazing conversations around that, but that is not normal. So I love that part of the speech where he talks about, if you identify as Christian and you are anti-African, you are a heathen, or you don't study the Bible. And so I would like to hear y'all's thoughts on that as well. And, any conversations you've had with folks who are like, well, I'm Christian, and then you'll give them a verse, or you'll have a conversation, and they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think in general, like you said, people say they love things but don't go out their way to study them, or I've made claims and said that eventually I want to convert to Islam, but like I'm reading about it, I need to read the Quran before I even feel comfortable converting all the way, right? So I can't just go in and just wing it and I'm Muslim, but I never read the Quran though, so yeah, I love Allah. So I think that goes into a lot. So if you really say you love something or you're committed to something, you have to know what it's all about. The same way he always used the analogy of like, if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever the case is, you want to know everything about them. You want to know the ins and outs. You want to know what they like, what they don't like. That's the same thing we have to approach, whether it's our spirituality, liberation, and also liberation and spirituality, as we've said many times when we did a whole episode about it, is not antagonistic against each other. They work and it was cohesive, so so I feel like I think we could utilize the spirituality and religion at the same time. And then, there's a lot of people I feel like I've probably come across that like have a lot of crazy misinterpretations of, scripture quotes and, because people, the same way it's been utilized, reactionary forces weaponize religion the same way, progressive forces have weaponized it, but they obviously have two objectives and two means when they do so. So, you have people who say, oh yeah, the Bible says, gay people are terrible and and all that stuff. Like, yeah, it's like, people, they don't really go in depth. They can't really give you multiple scriptures. They can't, really dissect these things for you in a way, right? They heard it from somewhere. They're trying to be dogmatic or whatever. So yeah, so I think it's important to study whatever religion you in, just make sure you study it and, you understand it all the way, kind of thoroughly go through it to understand it completely. You can't half-ass anything, in this world. So
yeah, and the same thing he talks about how even for those who are irreligious or like atheists or agnostic or just like or they might have a religion that doesn't have like a set God or that even there you still have some principles you have to follow. I know like I've been an atheist and you read like the works of different atheists and funny enough, like a lot of them happen to be revolutionary. So the understanding where that comes from and understanding that in some cases, like obviously, like there's some other like atheists that might have some like sketchy thoughts of other things, but again you have to think about like what and there's one thing that's already like brings about a lot in certain speeches about understanding the principles and not who is practicing. So like religious, even though haven't practiced a religion, that like it's still like a lot of things like love thy neighbor or like do unto others what do unto you, or there's stuff of like defend like practicing self-defense and some other things that like even if you don't go to church or you don't go to temple or a synagogue or a mosque or whatever, like but those are things that make sense in any sort of circumstance. So yeah, like you see the principle and you work the principle and what work you're doing, and if you think the principles suck, then reject it.
Yeah, for real. Like when people talk about anarchy, it's the very same thing where people look at it as simply defining destruction because it's, that says no gods, no masters, or it talks about, anarchy. It's literally the lack of a hierarchical leadership. That is what anarchy is, but it doesn't mean it's not structured. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have any organizational practice. That's impossible to have a society that you want as an objective and not have an organizing practice. That literally makes no sense. And so as organized as capitalism is, in a funny way, it's also very disorganized because it promotes individualism. You cannot have any sort of collective power with individualism. So the system itself is organized, but it creates this system in which everyone under it is not organized, if that makes sense. And so anything that is going to be organized for the masses, of course, a capitalist system is going to be directly against and work directly against.
You're stupid because you come to stifle and to limit your intellectual horizons. Those of you who accept that Columbus discovered America in 1492 know absolutely nothing about the history of this country before 1492 and consequently cannot respect the American Indians, but think they have a right to be on reservations and the Bantu stands in South Africa. We cannot allow the American capitalist system to do this. We have a responsibility to take our history, to strip it of all the racism, to gather completely its integrity, and to use it as a weapon to carry us on. We say we must strip ourselves quickly of it. Only the masses make history, and we must not allow the white man to write history as if it is a white man who makes our history. The other day, when discussing with the man, he came to tell me that the Africans in America ought to be very thankful to Johnson. He's talking about President Lyndon Baines Johnson. I was shocked, really. Yes, he said, if it wasn't for Johnson, where would you be? I wanted to know. He correctly informed me that Johnson signed more civil rights bills than probably any other president of the century. I agreed with him. He said, you see, I told you. I told him no. If you would go back and look at history, Johnson certainly he signed more civil rights bills than any other president. But if you look at that time, the masses of my people by themselves took to the streets of this country, took to the cities of this country, were trying to burn them down. Johnson better hurry up and sign a whole lot of bills to keep peace.
The last question I have, if y'all have any questions, I would love to hear. But I was thinking, hypothetically, obviously, Kwame Ture is not physically here. And this is, the kind of question that's like, oh boy, but what do y'all think, if he were here, seeing the work that we're doing in terms of doing these podcasts and seeing, organizing itself, seeing that collectively people still are not organized. Do you think the message would be the same? How do you think he would reach people? What do you think his thoughts would be? And obviously he's not here, so that would be hard to answer, but I'm just sort of imagining what would that be like?
Yeah, the message hasn't changed because the system hasn't changed, and we still disorganized. That's just the reality of where we're at. We're still disorganized, so he would still call for us to organize. And I know he was trying to create unity with various organizations like the NOI and others, that were out there, NAACP and so forth and so on. So, he would still be trying to make that, big part of his efforts. I think if maybe he didn't, pass away, so early, he would have probably been able to, see that, or make it happen, or, some way. And obviously we would have been a part of that, as part of the A-APRP, and what I'm talking about in general, to help make that happen. So, yeah, I think the message doesn't change at all. So, yeah, it's organized. You still got to organize, you still got to join organizations and everything. So he probably went harder because he was like, man, I've been saying this for how long? Yeah. Y'all, he was already kind of amped up. I remember watching one, I think even in the same one, he was like, if you don't organize, shut up. I'm like, dang. I'm like, all right. I felt that. I'm like, man, that hit me in my soul right there. I'm like, thank God I'm in an organization. I'm like, I gotta shut up.
I can only imagine of seeing him on with social media, you're on social media, you're sharing this stuff and you're sharing my videos. Are you organized? I don't want to see that. I got 5,000 retweets. Are these retweets organized? I don't know. No. So yeah, I think it's the same thing. Like the medium is different. You'll see some of the positives, like some of the stuff against police violence, against imperialist wars and so forth. Positive of that, but then you also see some of this stuff I saw Beyonce. She does this thing about Panther Party, and are these people are they organized?
Exactly. It's like, yeah, so social media can't be our metric, man. This you getting retweets or you getting likes versus like that's pretty much like individualism. It's like, yo, look at me, I'm teaching everybody. Like, it's like, no, you have to create collective consciousness. Obviously, I'm not gonna dialectically look at it, just in general, like, I do understand, like, 'cause even for me, sometimes people say things, I'm like, oh, I wasn't aware of this, let me go look it up. But that's going to be the basis of our organization. And we don't even own these platforms. They could literally shut it down like that. What's going to happen if the internet gets shut down? Like, we don't own these platforms. So at that point, you're just going to be lost. But if you're organizing with comrades, within your community or just in general, then, you're able to, create that. You still have that cohesiveness and, create that collective consciousness and political education and so forth and so on. So
you said, are these tweets organized? I'm bugging.
You like my status, but does this part of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party? Are they part of the Black Alliance for Peace? Right. Are they part of Black Lives Matter?
Something tells me he would say something like that. And even that, are these tweets organized? And also, we do not have the ownership of the platforms, and that is the means to get the message out. I think, are these tweets organized is actually perfect. Oh man. So I don't know, do y'all have any questions or any thoughts in general about that particular speech? And of course, we will post the link to the speech. And yeah, please, again, listen to the speeches, but also read the words. Because I think when you read stuff, you can take and you can reread and you can reread it and also study it with folks. And having a video, having that as a companion, but I don't think that should be the singular source of Kwame Ture's wisdom.
And also, if for whatever reason you aren't able to read the books, then find some audiobooks, find someone who can help read it for you, find someone who can do something with you. So you want to make sure that if we're talking about the masses, you gotta make sure that the masses get that literacy however they can. So if the video helps you understand his words, fine. As you know, they work in tandem.
Yeah. It's the same thing, man. Organize, listening to Ray. If you listen to him, listen to his words, he's gonna tell you every time organize. So just know that's what you got to do. Just don't hear it and tweet about it and quote it and say, oh yeah, he said to organize, but I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. If you're gonna post about him all the time, at least take heed of some of his words, right? So that's what we got to do. That's the underlying message to everything. You got to work, and we're not saying you have to join the A-APRP. We say that all the time. The same way he said it in the video himself. If you don't want to join our organizations, if you don't think our philosophy or ideology doesn't align with you, then there's plenty of organizations out there you can join. So you can create your own. So yeah, join an organization.
Absolutely. And we have fellow comrades who also create content of this sort that are with the A-APRP. So we do have our comrades, as mentioned, in the Tiwa territory or New Mexico chapter. So they have a podcast on Thursdays. So they do once a week, as we do once a week. There's also our Ancestors' Voices, which is once a week on Sundays. And so that is Shakura and Ajamu, father and daughter. And so families are organizing together. That is, families, friends, everyone should be organizing. We have Revolutionary African Women. So that is once a month. We have the Forward Ever podcast that is on Spotify, and that happens. So there are various ways we can get this content, listen to it, take it in, and be fueled to organize and do this work. As Jeffrey said, you don't have to join the A-APRP. You can love everything we said. Where you're like, I don't know, I don't have the capacity to work with the A-APRP right now, or I love what y'all saying, but I don't necessarily agree. There are plenty of other organizations. So create an organization, as Jeffrey said, and just, again, take this in. We obviously love Kwame Ture. I know Jeffrey does, especially. But we all love Kwame Ture here. And Kwame Ture has inspired us to do this work. And it is on his shoulders we stand, because he was in the first work study circle developing the A-APRP. And he did that work from 1968 until the day he physically left this earth. If that is not inspiring, I don't know what is. So I intend, as long as I'm on this earth, I hope I am here for a long time. My intention is to do this work. And my intention is to keep talking about this work. My intention is to go home and continue this work. But the intention is to always do this work, to always be thinking dialectically, questioning the world around us, and organizing. And that is what we totally need to be doing. And again, we can love all the music or whatever, but when it comes down to it, where do we stand? And that is what is of utmost importance. Evan, what you got?
All right. So again, if you're African, they're playing organizations like join the A-APRP. We'll have the link in the description. You got Black Alliance for Peace, you got Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, you got all these other organizations. If you're not African, they're playing allied organizations that are with us as well. And again, just if you want to keep on watching those videos, keep on watching YouTube, fine, like do it. But you gotta organize. If Ture's words won't convince you, our words will. So organize.
Organization decides everything. Forward ever, backwards never.
Forward.
Or whatever.